Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and this is Janis, and we're your host of the Police Accountability Report. And today we have a breaking news update on the trial of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. After roughly 11 hours of deliberation, the jury has come forward with a verdict: guilty on all three charges of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. These charges could have a sentence roughly of 40 years, 25 years, and 10 years, respectively. So I'm here with my reporting partner, Janis, to discuss some of the implications of this case. Right. Stephen, first, are you surprised to see that they came back with guilty verdicts? We have seen so many cases of police brutality with body camera footage where there were no guilty verdicts, where no one was held to account. Did this surprise you?
Well, certainly from what you see in the courtroom, Derek Chauvin was surprised, which I think they had thought they had run the normal sort of police evade responsibility playbook where they had brought forward an expert witness who had tried to sow enough doubt. And I think they thought also because of the composition of the jury, all they had to do was sow a little doubt. And at worst, it would be a hung jury. And I think they were surprised. I mean, it came back very quickly, and it seemed like the jury didn't really take a lot of time or need a lot of time to deliberate. So I think the people who were surprised in the courtroom was Derek Chauvin and his attorney.
Now, you mentioned that the defense had a surprise witness or a special witness, and we know him as Dr. David Fowler, the former chief medical examiner here in Maryland. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the background of David Fowler and why the defense would use him as their ace in the hole?
Well, it was really interesting because what we saw was the playbook of sort of the political economy of police power exposed in the trial. Dr. David Fowler is a well-known medical pathologist who was the state medical examiner here in Maryland, and he was well known for coming up with crazy scientific theories about why police were not responsible for killings.
There is exposure to a vehicle exhaust, so potentially carbon monoxide poisoning. So this is one of those cases where you have so many conflicting different manners. The carbon monoxide would usually be classified as an accident.
So in this case, he came up with this bizarre carbon monoxide theory where the tailpipe somehow was more responsible than the knee on George Floyd's neck. And what that exposed to the nation is how this usually works. But the thing that's tragic about it is that has usually worked here in Maryland. Yes. Now, in Maryland, Dr. Fowler was capable of making this ruling on the death certificate so that police would be accountable. We're showing the body cam footage now, right now of Anton Black, and you're seeing officers lay on top of him. And in that case, Dr. Fowler ruled that his death was an accident. So just to show you that this is something that Fowler did quite consistently. So really, it exposed a process that sometimes goes on behind the scenes, but was now there for everyone to see.
So we know that Dr. David Fowler was being paid $350 an hour for his consulting work for Derek Chauvin's defense team, whereas I believe it was the pulmonologist, Dr. Tobin, who waived any fee whatsoever. What does this tell you about the political economy of defending policing and protecting police power?
I think it's really interesting that you've noticed that many of these cases, like the case of the death of Freddie Gray, and in this case with George Floyd, happen in Democratic cities, right? So you say to yourself, well, Democrats are more, police reform advocates. But truthfully, why do these cases keep happening in Democratic cities? Because of the political economy, because there's so much money in policing, and policing funnels that money back in the political system. It used to be that police were barred from even donating to political campaigns, but that's all changed. And so in these cities like Baltimore, like Minneapolis, you see this great ability of people like Dr. David Fowler to flourish in a system that rewards bad science, junk science, and basically bolstering police violence. And you see policing flourish in general. I mean, even in Baltimore, our mayor, who is a proponent of reform, just proposed increasing the police budget by like $20-30 million. Our colleagues reported for our Battleground Baltimore series. So it is so fundamental to the political power structure that it's very hard to reform. As you'll notice here in Maryland, they just recently passed a huge number of reforms, including repealing the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, right, which was a critical component of allowing police to evade responsibility. But you know what they didn't get rid of? Was the idea that a police officer who commits a crime can still have a pension paid for by the taxpayers.
So you tell me a police officer that commits a crime, that is convicted of a crime, still gets a pension paid for by taxpayers.
Still gets a lifetime annuity, basically, courtesy of the taxpayers. The point being that until you declaw the political power and the political economy of policing, you will still have George Floyd type problems. I mean, It's just inevitable. It's something that, can only be fixed if you fix the political economy. And really, that's what we're seeing today. Maybe this will be a first step in that direction, because basically the jury took one look at Fowler's testimony and said, that's BS, and moved on. So maybe this is the end of that, or maybe that's the beginning of the end of this type of power, but we'll have to see.
Absolutely. And I have to say, too, that we have seen police unions spend millions of dollars, in particular, in this case, millions of dollars for Derek Chauvin's defense team. He had 12 lawyers on his defense team. That's millions of dollars out of the police union's budget, which is money that comes from the police officers who are paid by the taxpayers.
Right, exactly.
Now, recently, the largest fraternal police union said that this trial was fair. This is the first time I have ever seen a police union make a social media statement like this. So even the police union was taken aback and is watching their steps now that this George Floyd trial has a guilty verdict attached to it. And I'm wondering whether or not this is going to keep them on their toes from now on.
Yeah, well, that'll be the thing to see. The fallout will be critical because, in the case of Freddie Gray in our city, all the officers were exonerated. And I think that empowered the police here. But I think George Floyd might be a sea change in this sense, because all the old playbook didn't work. So now we'll see whether or not they start looking at that old playbook and saying it's time to throw it out.
Well, I think the police union sees that this guilty verdict in the George Floyd case is the beginning of Americans demanding change, and that today was not just justice for Black Americans, but for all Americans. And of course, we want to extend our heartfelt condolences to the Floyd family. We know this is just the first step of a long fight for justice for their family. Thank you for watching us. This is Taya Graham. This is Stephen Janis. We're the Police Accountability Report. Please be safe out there.